It is the People Station, V103. Amma Asante. How are you?
Hi, I'm really good. Thank you.
It is a pleasure to meet you.
It's a great pleasure to be here, Ramona. Thank you.
The Pan-African Film Festival is happening right here in Atlanta. What better place for it to happen? And that's why folks notable like yourself are here.
Absolutely. It's a really great honor to be here. This is the first time I've been to the Pan-African Film Festival, and it's here in Atlanta. Belle, my movie, is the closing movie, which is a great honor. So I'm here with... I am here with mbatha-raw, who's the lead actress who plays the title role of Belle. And we're here to kind of celebrate our movie and also celebrate the DVD release and the digital HD release, which is coming out shortly.
I am going to be the first to download it onto my iTunes library. Can I tell you?
Fantastic.
Now, let's talk about the plight of African Americans. Okay, of course, we have our very own African American history.
Sure.
But there is also that history that a lot of people aren't aware of because we get so caught up in our struggle.
Yeah.
But in Europe as well, you grew up in London.
Yeah, that's right.
And there is a divide there as well, even in Germany.
There's a divide and there's a connect. There's a connect between our story and your story in so many ways. And that's why we are the diaspora, because, you know, we all came from the same place and we're spread out across the world now, and that's for a reason. And I guess, you know, what Belle does is it looks back to England's role in the slave trade.
Yes.
And how, when I say we, I always feel a bit schizophrenic because I'm both English and black.
Right.
So like now I'm talking as a Brit. We were the middlemen. We were the suppliers. We were the dealers. We were the guys who left with the ships, went to Africa, filled them up with enslaved people and took them either to the Caribbean or to the Americas and sold them. So we were the suppliers in so many ways. And Belle looks at that history. And although it's very much about a privileged black woman who wasn't a slave, she was the child of an enslaved woman, it looks at the money, the finance, the economy that informed that wealthy English world that we're so used to seeing in typical British costume dramas, but we never see what is the trade that informed the economy.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I covered the DNC and the RNC.
Yeah.
And that's the Republican National Convention and Democratic. And during the RNC, there was an event at the Manhattan Yacht Club.
Okay.
Which most of those, it was the wealthiest, it's one of the wealthiest clubs you could ever belong to.
Sure.
However, it was established from the money.
Exactly.
From, of course, the slave trade and that free labor in the South.
Exactly.
Of course, you know, slavery was abolished in the North here in the States.
That's right.
But a lot of that money, those families come from that background.
That's the economy that informs what they stand on today. Absolutely. And it's the same in Britain. I mean, some of the most beautiful homes you'll see and the most beautiful architecture you'll see for our oldest homes was made from the money of selling human beings, selling them to America, selling them in the Caribbean and in the islands. And that's what Belle really, really looks about. And, you know, when I made this film, I wanted to make a layered movie that was, set in the 18th century, but would have contemporary resonance and was a movie that you would want to get the digital download of. You would want to own it on DVD because it's layered. Like the more you watch it, the more you will get from it, the more you will see from it. And that's deliberate because, you know, our experience was complex.
It was. It really was on both
still
sides
is.
of the pond, as they say, right?
Yeah.
And you know, it's interesting because you talk about the diaspora and there's such a disconnect sometimes with the Caribbean community and African Americans. And my grandfather's from Barbados.
Yeah.
And he would say that there was a disconnect between even Jamaicans and Bajans.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but we're all from, and even Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
When slaves were dropped there.
Yeah.
And then slaves were dropped in a lot of these countries.
Yeah.
So to hear you say that from a Brit perspective, it really does group it all together for people who may not be so united as they should.
As they should be. And what's really interesting, what gives me goosebumps about the title of the film festival, Pan-African Film Festival, was that my father was a Pan-Africanist. And what that meant was the idea that we should have a United States of Africa, that we should, as Africans as a continent, should unite. Because, you know, you talk about African Americans in the Caribbean and the divide even in the Caribbean, but you get that in Africa. And this is something that colonialism, as well as slavery created, because, you know, what my dad would pump into me was this idea of the colonialist and the kind of slave traders MO was the idea of divide and rule.
Yes.
And Pan-Africanism was the pill for that, was the solution for that. If they want to divide and rule, no, we hold it together.
Yeah.
And it looks to the idea not just of Pan-Africanism for me, but to the idea that we are a diaspora and we are united by a common experience. Right. Whether that experience was experienced in the 50s, you know, when a lot of Caribbean people came over to the UK, and I was telling folks around me earlier that when my parents came over from Ghana, you know, the signs in the 60s on the doors were no Irish, no coloreds, and no dogs.
No Irish, no coloreds, no dogs.
You know, that was the late 50s, early 60s. That's the signs you saw on the wall. So we are united by a common experience, and the details of that experience may be different, but the scars, the results, the healing that needs to come from that is the same. And
it's so interesting because, you know, you're so close in Europe. If you haven't traveled, anyone who's listening, every country in Europe is so close.
Yeah.
That you could literally hop, skip, and jump into Spain. And so when I think about the history, the Reconquest, getting the Moorish influence out of Spain.
Yeah.
You know, and you're talking about Africa. I mean, nomadic folks came in there and colored it up, as they say.
Absolutely.
Colored up Italy. It's interesting to see how it always goes back to the same thing. You know?
It does.
It does. And I hate to say that, but it really does. And
it does.
My friends and brothers and sisters, and I have actual family in Germany, they go through the very same thing.
Absolutely.
They are being discriminated against, followed, profiled. And I'm like, not in Germany too.
No, it's the same. It's the same. And that's the thing, is that, you know, I always talk about growing up in England as a young black Brit girl. You know, we had no choice. We had to look to America for our role models, because despite everything you've been through, you had the Essence magazines.
Yes.
You had the Ebony. You had the BET. You had the news anchors. You know, you had the people who we could look up to say, you know, the sky might be the limit for us. We you know, there should be no limits for us. And we you know, we're behind in Europe in some ways to that extent.
Why do you think it was that you did not have necessarily the impact of a figure like Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.?
Well, first of all, we came over later.
Okay.
Like, you know, so even though, you know, you have the world of Belle, where there was a significant amount of people of color in London, let's say, during the 18th century, who in particular were not even slaves. In any
which I find interesting
which
as well.
Is fascinating.
Yes.
So, but however, that said, in order to have a voice, you do need numbers. You do need numbers, and we didn't have the numbers, and we came over later. So I think the fact that Americans were on American soil and had been fighting the fight for such a long time. I mean, you got to think about it. When a lot of people of color came over in the 50s to the UK, you know, there is this kind of myth that we all came over on one boat, and, you know, called the Windrush. And we all, you know, my mom was on that boat. My dad was on that boat. Apparently,
on boat we keep hearing about.
Everybody was on that boat. But when we did come over in great numbers because we were invited to the UK, I mean, you know, my parents were in shock.
But there's a difference between being invited and being tolerated after someone has created this sort of environment.
Oh yeah, but that was the whole confusion, and that's why my parents and people who came before my parents were in shock. Because on the one hand, there was this invitation: come over. We need help with our transport, our health system. We need nurses. We need people to do the jobs that many Brits don't want to do. And yet, when they got there, they got the shock of their lives. I mean, I used to tell my mum, "Mummy, you have spit on your back." When she would come home, she'd get off the bus and she would come home. You think about it, you're invited over and then you get here and there are signs on the doors. No Irish, no coloreds, no blacks, no dogs. There are those signs and you think, but you told me to come here. You colonized my country. And then you said because of that, you have a right to therefore be over here in the UK. And then we got to the UK and it was like, but actually we don't really want you.
But that was the advancement of Western civilization and culture anyway. That was the MO.
Absolutely.
That was the MO.
Absolutely.
And, you know, it's interesting because we did have the Black Panthers. My father was a Black Panther.
Wow.
So I grew up very aware and very awake.
Well, I was just talking about Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael.
That was the first book I ever read.
Yeah, just before I came in here, who my father was obsessed with, you know, Married to Miriam Makeba and, you know, all of that stuff. So again, in England, we were aware. We were reading this stuff. We knew what had been going on with you guys and what was going on. And despite the fact that we didn't have a world in which we could express what you guys were expressing, we still knew what your story was and is.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
well, we could go on for days because seriously, I really this is where I wake up, especially now, and I feel like I'm more like alive and awake in this moment than anything. And I have to tell you, Stokely Carmichael, Look Out Whitey, Black Power's Gonna Get Your Mama. It's one of the first books I read as a kid.
I will.
It was on my mom and dad's bookshelf because they were in college at the time, and that college movement was very active.
Yeah.
And, you know, young people are the ones who actually change the world.
Young people are the ones.
Yeah.
And you look at things like the Arab Spring and all of that, and you look and you see, and now we have something called, for better or for worse, the internet, which makes that even more powerful.
Yes.
But for me, I look at the uniform of the Black Panthers, and that was power.
Yeah, it was. It really was.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of them, you know, a lot of them were plagued with, and I really believe drugs are, it's like a spirit, and it will get into you, and, you know, I don't know, it will change the course of where you think you're going because it does take over your body. It turns you into a zombie.
Yeah.
And for a lot of them, friends of mine that also grew up with parents who were in the movement.
Right.
Unfortunately, they had a lot of drug abuse or discouragement
but also
in their families.
Also, it was the period, though.
It was.
It was that transition period of freedom and drugs, and you think about what was going on in the UK as well, and that whole period of women's positions were changing as well. You know, the pill came along and changed the idea of how a woman could be independent. Mm-hmm. You know, now a woman could control her fertility, and it would be up to her, not up to the guy. Do you know what I mean? So it was that period where there was a sense of freedom was coming in different ways, and with freedom must come responsibility.
Absolutely. Well, this is fascinating, a fascinating talk, and this makes everyone want to go out to the annual Pan-African Film Festival. But not only that, we need to know when Belle is going to be available in my iTunes library, because I'm telling you, I have my Apple TV set up and I am so ready.
Well, I'm going to be one of the first to download it for myself. I'm telling you, August 12th is the digital HD, and the 26th of August you can get the physical DVD and own it and have it in your library. And
I will have it.
I
will
tell
have
all
it
of
on
you
every
to go
device.
out.
Okay, we got an iPad here.
Absolutely. If your iPad, your iPhone,
let me see.
You name it.
Yes.
I'm
going to be prepared.
Own it and be proud. It's all of
Yes.
our history, and it's a history we can be proud of. This is a woman who changed the course of our freedom, you know, across the board from the UK to America, and it's a part of our history we can be so proud of.
Next, I have another film that you have to do.
Okay, tell me.
The story of Thomas Jefferson.
Well, that's a fascinating story, isn't it?
Yes.
Polarizing and fascinating, and we were talking about it yesterday, and I'm there.
You're there.
I'm there.
We expect this. Thank you so much.
Thank
it was amazing
you.
to meet you.
I enjoyed that so much. Thank you, Ramona.
Man. I feel good. Don't you guys feel good? This is what an awesome
great.
talk.
Thank
It makes me.
you.
I'm going back to England.
Yeah,
I'm going
do,
back.
and then hug everybody
I'm hugging
and say, "You are
everybody.
me, I am you."
Oh wait. Are you getting this? Don't start spending. Okay.
Oh.
It is not the euro. It is the pound. And I had a lesson. Okay. I was really hungry. I was covering Live 8, and so I said, "Oh, I gotta eat."
Oh.
I go into McDonald's. Now I bought some things already.
And that was
like,
a hard
oh,
time
this
for
is
the
awesome.
that was a hard time for the dollar.
Oh, it was nasty.
England, yeah.
I went and bought a Big Mac and it said $3.50. Right?
Yeah.
It's English. I can read.
Yeah.
The receipt printed out in US dollars.
Yeah.
That was a $7 Big Mac.
That was a $7
I was
Big
like,
Mac.
wait.
But you know what?
Everything is double.
You know what?
I was
That
dying.
was the time when I used to come to America to buy
shop?
to buy a UK designer, Vivienne Westwood, because I would use my pound. And I would get it in dollars. I would get it half price.
But wait,
I loved it.
Wait, then I noticed that winter that at the malls.
Yes.
It was filled with British people. I'm like, no wonder you guys are coming over here laughing.
We were having fun.
And we thought we did that in Cancun. We thought, the peso. Boy,
no. No,
you
we were
guys are laughing at us.
No, that was when I got my economics lesson.
Ooh,
and I was like,
nasty.
I'm like, Vivienne Westwood, she's a UK designer, but she's cheaper in America. I love this. It's worth the flight.
See, tips on shopping too is what you get here.
Absolutely. That's what happens when you get a female director, right?
Yes.
It's like the whole full spectrum.
I love it. Well, thank you for stopping by.
Thank you. I enjoyed it so much.
And we'll see you at the Pan-African Film Fest.
You will. Closing night. Thank you. Thank you. How great.